I've still got family in New York as I grew up a little upstate in Woodstock, in fact, Bearsville, right up the street from Bearsville
Oh,
State.
great.
And I heard through the grapevine that the show you put on, Scott Sharrard and friends celebrate the life of Dwayne Allman and the Muscle Shoals sound, was like one of the best shows ever, like, period. Can you walk us through putting that show together and how that came about?
I came up with the idea of doing Muscle Shoals sound because, Dwayne Allman started his career as a guitarist in the studio with this incredible array of amazing artists like Johnny Jenkins and Aretha Franklin, and then eventually like Herbie Mann, Boz Scaggs, and then of course the early Allman Brothers rehearsals were done at Muscle Shoals. So
Yeah.
the first, I think it was the Hourglass or the Almond Joys, I can't remember which one, did their first demos with Rick Hall at Muscle Shoals. That Muscle Shoals sound that ended up resulting in a band like the Allman Brothers has to do with knocking down all these walls of like genre and to a certain extent culture and race and all the things that divide us. And I think that's why the show resonated, is it kind of pulled together a lot of different threads of American roots music history. And then we had this amazing house band, and the guests were just, it was unbelievable. We had everyone from Dwayne Betts, Dickie's son, who's a phenomenal guitar player, to Tash Neal, and we had Vernon Reed and Robert Randolph, Vannice Thomas, the daughter of Rufus Thomas, who's just an amazing vocalist, Lisa Fisher, who's like an otherworldly talent. It was just, it was like all the best people you could ever imagine were there to do it.
Did Greg ever talk about his brother Dwayne otherwise? I mean, did his life and death have continued significance to him in a way that he would talk about it, or was it one of those things he kept very private, like a lot of us do?
He kept a lot of things very private, and Greg would choose who he would bring all the way in. And I don't know why this is the case, but people have always felt very comfortable talking to me. I think that's why I feel a lot of comfort as a music educator as well. I really try to listen and I try to take time to understand where someone else is coming from. And when I joined Greg's band, he really started to gravitate towards me on the first tour. I'll never forget. I think we were going to play like our fourth gig, 2000 January 2009. We were playing multiple nights at the Rams Head in Annapolis, and we were in that gym at the Lowe's down the street. I was running on the treadmill, and he came in. And at this point, I'm like the new guy in the band, and I was nervous. And he comes in and he starts talking to me. So I stopped on the treadmill, and we sat down. I'll never forget, on these two treadmills, and we talked for an hour. And he told me all these stories about Dwayne and how hard it was to lose him, and how hard it was to go on with life after losing him, and how hard it is to play music and think about him. And it was just this really like beautiful moment we had. And it was kind of like so early in my tenure that it didn't occur to me till years later when, he asked me to be the music director and we started writing songs. I started to understand, this started on that day, on the sitting on the treadmills when we should have been working out. Instead, we were talking about how do you go on after losing the most important person in your life besides your mom, you know?
Let's chat about Little Feat. You've said before that they were equivalent to the Beatles for you growing up. I mean, they were the band for you. I believe you were fortunate enough to see them live growing up. What went through your mind the first time you ever saw a video or photo of Lowell George on stage?
Well, Lowell was okay. So I was listening to the band the whole time I was growing up on the radio and on cassette and on vinyl and stuff. And my dad playing their songs in the living room, me learning their songs in the living room. But Lowell was like a mystery in the '80s when I was a kid. So I saw them live for the first time when I was about 12 years old. They were on the Let It Roll tour. Um, so this is, we had Richie was there, and we saw a few shows on that tour. A couple that specifically that I can remember, and then a couple years later after Representing the Mambo came out. And from the first time I saw them, I said, this is the band I want to be in. And when I was 10, I remember seeing a picture of Lowell George in a magazine, and I was an overweight, completely um, ostracized, uncomfortable child, and I was obsessed with Chuck Berry and Mad Magazine.
Hmm?
And when I saw Lowell George and I heard Sailing Shoes album and the Waiting for Columbus album, I said, this is what I'm going to do with my life. Then I heard the Allman Brothers for the first time with a guitar in my hand because I heard them growing up, but then I had a guitar and I would play along, and I said, oh boy. But the thing is, I would look at a picture of Gregg Allman and I'd go, well, this guy's like a matinee idol. But I looked at a picture of Lowell George and I go, maybe I can do this. It was like for a fat Midwestern kid, with an intellectual bent who loved blues music, there was no greater gift than discovering Little Feat.
Was there a point during the pandemic where you thought, oh, well, this is it, I guess? I mean, you just made this massive and exciting career move, and then the whole kind of world starts changing around you and everyone else, obviously. Um, was there a point where that kind of concerned you, or did you always kind of feel like, okay, well, we'll just get past this and get back to doing our touring and whatever it is that Little Feat does?
Well, the break, the pandemic break, it did a number of really astonishing things for me on a personal level. I mean, my children, my boys are 10 and 4 now, and to be honest with you, between Greg and my solo career, and my wife and I have been together, well over 20 years, and I just have the most amazing wife and children you could ever ask for, and at times I have felt very undeserving of them with how much I have to be away, and quickly went from being an existential crisis to an existential revelation as a human. Then being on the phone with Bill Payne regularly, starting to unravel all the problems with Little Feat and having the time to reassess what Little Feat could be instead of what it had become. I've heard Bill refer to this chapter of the band as like the third movement, with like maybe Feats Don't Feel Me Now being the first one, and then Let It Roll being the second, and this being the third. So we'll see what we can accomplish. But the pandemic, to answer your question, it gave Little Feat time to really sort out what it needed to do to grow in the absence of the brilliance of Paul Barrere. And of course, we lost Richie in, what was it, 2011, and of course we lost Lowell in 1979. So the band has been through losing 3 geniuses. So, how do they figure out how to carry on? Well, I mean, Tony and I'll just keep swinging and see if we get lucky. I mean, that's all we can do. But we're going to do a Waiting for Columbus tour, and then we're going to make a new Little Feat album, and we're going to try to get this band in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, that's what we're going to try to do.
And well deserved. Now that the world is getting into its groove again, you guys are touring again and have an upcoming show right here on the Gulf Coast at the Saengar Theater in Mobile on March 23rd. What can our viewers expect to see at that show?
Well, we will be playing the Waiting for Columbus album front to back, and it's not going to be a note-for-note interpretation of the album. We're going to stretch out things here and there. We're going to take some risks and chances with it. And then I think, at some of these gigs, I'm not sure about Mobile, but we're going to have special guests showing up here and there on the tour to sing a song here or there. What do I think they're going to get? I think they're going to get like one of the most kick-ass rock and roll shows they can see. And then when we come back in 23, maybe they'll hear some new music.
So you mentioned some social media earlier. Where can we follow you all on social media, as well as you individually, with regard to some of the instructional things you were telling about earlier? We can put it up on the screen for everybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, for Little Feat, I mean, it's, what is it, littlefeat.net? I can't remember. And then, Little Feat has a Facebook and Instagram page. Those aren't hard to find. For me, I always say if you can surmount the challenge of spelling my name, I'm very easy to find. So Scott Sharrard, SHARRARD.com, and it's the same thing on Facebook and Instagram. There isn't, I'm not aware of any other Scott Sharrard musicians in the world at this point. And for the education stuff, really, True Fire has been my partner in the last few years, and I love this company, and they are just every year they are just expanding by leaps and bounds. It's been unbelievable. I started with them pretty early on. So if you go to truefire.com and you look me up, again, if you can spell my name, you can find me. I have a few courses on there for guitar, and one of them called Southern Roots also gets into like how I produce and write songs a little bit. But most of my content on TrueFire is for the hardcore guitarists.
Scott, thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Sharrard.
Thanks for having me, man.